The ring sat in my palm like a promise I was about to break. 3 months of overtime at the construction site, inspecting foundations and load-bearing walls for the city, all for this moment. Cassie stood by our kitchen window, coffee mug in hand, watching the rain streak down the glass of our little rental house on Maple Street. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. "Cass," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. "Turn around." She pivoted, her auburn hair catching the morning light, green eyes curious. At 32, she still had that restless energy that first drew me to her 6 years ago at Murphy's Bar. Back then, I thought it was excitement about life. Now I wondered if it was just impatience. I dropped to one knee on the worn linoleum floor. Her coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering against the counter. Brown liquid splashed everywhere, but I kept going. "Cassie Marie Porter, will you marry me?" The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Rain drummed against the roof of our small house, the only sound in the universe. Her face went through a series of expressions, surprise, confusion, something that looked almost like panic. "Nate," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. "What do you mean, you can't?" "I mean I won't." She stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. "I'm a free woman, Nate. I don't want to be tied down." Free woman? After 6 years together, 3 of them living in this house, sharing bills and dreams and lazy Sunday mornings. Free woman. I stood up slowly, my knees creaking like the old floorboards. The ring disappeared back into my pocket. "Free woman," I repeated. "That's interesting phrasing." "Don't make this harder than it has to be," she said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. "Oh, I'm not making anything hard, sweetheart. I'm just processing the fact that my girlfriend of 6 years considers herself free." I walked to the kitchen counter, grabbed a dish towel, and started cleaning up the spilled coffee. Free from what, exactly? "Nate, free from commitment? Free from responsibility? Or just free from me?" Her silence was answer enough. I finished wiping the counter, folded the towel neatly, and set it aside. Everything in its place, just like I'd learned in my carpentry days before I became a building inspector. Measure twice, cut once. Too bad I'd forgotten that rule when it came to relationships. "I'll pack your things," I said calmly. "You don't have to?" "Yes, I do." I looked at her then, really looked. The woman I'd thought I knew, the woman I'd been ready to spend my life with. Because apparently you're a free woman, and free women don't need their stuff cluttering up someone else's house. I spent the next 2 hours methodically packing her belongings. Clothes from the closet we'd shared, toiletries from the bathroom counter, books from the shelves we'd built together last spring. Each item felt like evidence of a life I'd imagined but never really had. That's when I found the first gift. Hidden behind her winter coats, wrapped in tissue paper, was a jewelry box I'd never seen before. Inside, a gold bracelet with an inscription, "To my wild thing, B." B, not N for Nate. My hands were steady as I set the box aside and continued searching. Behind her shoe rack, I found a cell phone I'd never seen. The screen was locked, but the message previews were visible. "Can't wait to see you tonight." B, "Your husband working late again." B, "Meet me at the usual place." B, the usual place. How long had there been a usual place? I sat on our bed, my bed now, and stared at the phone. 6 years, 6 years of thinking we were building something together while she was apparently building something with B. The pieces started falling into place like dominoes. The late nights at the real estate office, the mysterious work dinners, the way she'd started putting her phone face down when we were together. I'm a free woman. Now I understood. She hadn't been rejecting my proposal. She'd been protecting her secret. I finished packing in silence, loaded everything into my truck, and drove to the storage facility on the edge of town. Unit 47, paid for a month in advance. I stacked her boxes with the same methodical care I used when inspecting construction sites. Everything organized, everything in its place. When I got home, the house felt different. Emptier, but somehow cleaner too. Like I'd finally removed something that had been rotting in the walls. I poured myself a whiskey and sat in my recliner, the one Cassie had always complained about. The phone, her secret phone, sat on the coffee table in front of me. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew it would only make things worse. But I'd spent 6 years living in ignorance. Maybe it was time for some truth. The phone buzzed. A text message from B appeared on the lock screen. "Cassie, you left your earrings in my car again. Same place as last time." Same place as last time. My garage. The photo that followed showed Cassie, half-dressed, leaning against my own workbench. I set down my whiskey and laughed. Actually laughed out loud in my empty house. Because there's something almost beautiful about betrayal when it's this complete, this thorough. She hadn't just cheated on me. She'd done it in my own garage, with my own tools watching. Nothing like being cuckolded in your own man cave, I said to the empty room. The whiskey burned going down, but not as much as the realization that I'd been living with a stranger. A free woman who'd been keeping herself very busy with B. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd find out who B was. Tonight, I'd drink to the end of my ignorance and the beginning of something else entirely. The next morning came with a hangover and a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee growing cold, while I stared at Cassie's secret phone. In the harsh light of day, the betrayal felt less like a surprise and more like a puzzle I should have solved months ago. My own phone buzzed. Denny Martinez, my best friend since high school and the best mechanic in 3 counties. "How'd it go with the proposal?" His voice crackled through the speaker. "About as well as a house built on quicksand," I said. "That bad, huh? Want to talk about it?" "Murphy's. 1 hour." Murphy's bar hadn't changed since 1987, which was exactly why I liked it. Dark wood, darker beer, and the kind of clientele that minded their own business. Denny was already there when I arrived, nursing a Budweiser despite it being barely noon. "You look like hell," he said by way of greeting. "Feel worse." I slid into the booth across from him. "She turned me down, Danny. 6 years, and she turned me down." Ouch. Any particular reason, or just general commitment issues? I pulled out the secret phone and set it on the table between us. "She's been seeing someone whose name starts with B." Denny whistled low. "How long?" "Working on figuring that out." I flagged down the bartender and ordered a beer. "But get this, they've been using my garage for their little rendezvous." "Your garage? That's cold, man. That's Antarctica cold." "Yeah, well, apparently I've been living in the Arctic for a while now." I took a long pull of beer. "Question is, what do I do about it?" "You could confront her." "Already packed her stuff. She's out." "You could confront him." "Don't even know who he is yet." Denny leaned back in his seat, studying me. "Or you could make them both wish they'd never been born." The suggestion hung in the air between us like smoke. Danny had always been the voice of reason in our friendship, the one who talked me out of stupid decisions. Hearing him suggest revenge felt like permission I didn't know I needed. "I'm a building inspector, Danny. I spend my days making sure foundations are solid and structures won't collapse. I'm not exactly the revenge type." "Maybe it's time to learn." That afternoon, I drove past Cassie's real estate office. Her car was in the parking lot, a red Honda Civic I'd helped her pick out 2 years ago. Through the window, I could see her at her desk, talking on the phone, laughing at something the caller said. She looked happy, relaxed, free. I parked across the street and waited. At 5:30, she emerged from the building with her boss, Marjorie Fields, a stern woman in her 50s who ran the office like a military operation. They talked for a few minutes before Marjorie got into a black Mercedes and drove away. Cassie didn't go to her car. Instead, she walked 3 blocks to Antonelli's, an upscale Italian restaurant I'd never been able to afford. Through the window, I watched her slide into a booth across from a man in an expensive suit. B, I presumed. Even from a distance, I could see he was everything I wasn't. Tall, where I was average height, polished where I was rough around the edges, the kind of man who'd never had calluses on his hands or concrete dust in his hair. They were comfortable together, familiar. This wasn't their first dinner. This wasn't even their 10th. I sat in my truck for an hour, watching them eat and laugh and touch hands across the table. When they finally left, walking to a silver Porsche parked right in front of the restaurant, I followed at a distance. The Porsche led me to the Riverside Apartments, a complex that had gone up 2 years ago. New construction, the kind of place that rented to young professionals and people trying to project success. Cassie had a key. I parked across the street and watched the lights come on in a 3rd-floor unit. Shadows moved behind the curtains. I didn't need to see more to understand what was happening. My phone rang. Cassie's regular number. "Hello, Nate." Her voice was careful, controlled. "I wanted to thank you for packing my things. That was considerate." "Just being helpful," I said, watching her shadow move across the apartment window. "Where are you staying?" "With a friend, just until I find my own place." "A friend. That's nice. Anyone I know?" The pause was long enough to drive a truck through. "I don't think so." "Well, I hope your friend has a comfortable couch." "He does." The slip was so small she probably didn't even realize she'd made it. But I caught it, filed it away with all the other pieces of evidence I was collecting. "I should go," she said. "We'll need to talk about the house, about dividing things up." "Sure, when you're ready." "Nate, I'm sorry. I really am." "Sorry for what exactly?" Another pause. "For hurting you." "You haven't hurt me, Cass. You've educated me. There's a difference." After I hung up, I sat in my truck until the lights in the apartment went out. Then I drove home to my empty house and started planning. If Cassie wanted to be a free woman, I'd help her achieve that goal. I'd make sure she was free of everything, her job, her reputation, her comfortable little arrangement with B, because if 6 years of my life meant nothing to her, then her comfort meant nothing to me. I pulled out my laptop and started researching. Riverside Apartments, Unit 3C, registered to Bryce LaRoche, owner of LaRoche Luxury Cars, the dealership that sold Porsches and Mercedes to people with more money than sense. Bryce LaRoche. B for Bryce. I'd found him. The next few days passed in a blur of routine, inspecting construction sites, filing reports, pretending my world hadn't shifted on its axis, but every spare moment was dedicated to learning about Bryce LaRoche and mapping the extent of Cassie's betrayal. LaRoche Luxury Cars sat on the good side of town, all glass and chrome and cars that cost more than most people's houses. I drove past it twice during my lunch breaks, studying the layout, watching the patterns. Bryce arrived each morning at 9:30 in his silver Porsche, left for long lunches at expensive restaurants, and stayed late enough to justify calling it dedication. On Thursday, I got my first real break. Tanya Morrison, Cassie's drinking buddy and fellow real estate agent, was holding court at Murphy's bar, 3 sheets to the wind and running her mouth about everyone in the office. "That Cassie," she was saying to anyone who'd listen, "thinks she's so smart with her secret romance. Like we don't all know she's been stepping out on that poor boyfriend of hers." I slid onto the bar stool next to her. "Evening, Tanya." She squinted at me through alcohol-glazed eyes. "Nate, haven't seen you around lately. How's Cassie?" "We broke up," I said simply. "Oh, honey, I'm sorry." She patted my arm with the exaggerated sympathy of the very intoxicated. "Though between you and me, I'm not surprised. That girl's got wandering eyes." "Does she now?" "Oh, absolutely. Been carrying on with that car dealer for months. Bryce something. Rich guy, fancy cars. You know the type." I signaled the bartender for 2 more beers. "Months, you said?" "At least 6, maybe more. She's been real secretive about it, but you can't hide that kind of thing forever, especially when you start showing up to work with jewelry you can't afford and talking about weekend trips you supposedly took alone." 6 months, minimum. While I was planning proposals and thinking about our future, she was planning exits and thinking about his. "The thing is," Tanya continued, leaning closer conspiratorially, "I think there's more to it than just romance. Cassie's been asking a lot of questions about client finances lately, real specific questions about who's buying what and for how much. That's her job, isn't it? Not the kind of questions she's asking, more like inside information type questions, the kind that would be real valuable to someone in the luxury car business who wants to know which clients have money to burn." I bought Tanya 2 more beers and listened to her spill every piece of gossip she'd collected over the past year. By closing time, I had a clearer picture of what I was dealing with. This wasn't just an affair, it was a business partnership built on betrayal, with Cassie feeding client information to Bryce so he could target the wealthiest buyers. Friday night, I put my new knowledge to work. I knew Cassie's schedule, knew she had showings until 7 and then dinner plans with a friend. I also knew she'd kept a spare key to our house hidden under the garden gnome by the front steps. What she didn't know was that I'd changed the locks. At 8:15, my phone rang. "Nate, I can't get into the house. Did you change the locks?" "I did." "Why would you do that?" "Because it's my house, Cass. My name on the lease, my security deposit, my furniture. You made it clear you don't want to be tied down to me, so I'm helping you achieve that goal. I just need to get a few things I forgot. Make a list. I'll pack them up for you." "This is ridiculous. We're adults. We can handle this maturely." "You're absolutely right. Adults don't sneak around behind each other's backs for 6 months. Adults don't use their partner's garage for romantic encounters with other people. Adults don't steal client information to help their lover's business." The silence on the other end was deafening. "I don't know what you think you know." "I know about Bryce, Cassie. I know about the apartment, the jewelry, the business arrangement. I know about all of it. You've been spying on me." "I've been paying attention, something I should have done months ago." She hung up on me. 10 minutes later, Bryce's Porsche pulled into my driveway. I watched from my living room window as he got out of the car and strutted up to my front door like he owned the place. He was everything I'd expected, tall, handsome in a generic way, wearing clothes that cost more than I made in a month. The kind of man who'd never doubted he deserved the best of everything. He pounded on the door with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. I opened it before he could knock again. "You must be Nate," he said, looking me up and down like he was appraising a used car. "I'm Bryce LaRoche." "I know who you are." "Good. Then you know I'm not someone you want to mess with. Cassie needs her things, and you're going to let her get them." I leaned against the doorframe, taking my time to study him. Up close, he was softer than he'd appeared from a distance, the kind of soft that comes from a life without real problems. "Actually, Bryce, I don't think I am." His face darkened. "Look, pal, I don't want any trouble, but Cassie's things are in there, and she's going to get them one way or another." "You're right about not wanting trouble," I said calmly, "because trouble is what you'll get if you keep standing on my property making demands. See, this is my house, my door, and my decision, and I've decided that Cassie can have her things when I'm good and ready to give them to her." "You can't just—" "I can do whatever I want. It's called property rights. You might want to look into them before you start your next affair with someone else's girlfriend." The word affair hit him like a slap. His jaw tightened, and for a moment I thought he might actually try to push past me. I almost hoped he would. Instead, he stepped back, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "This isn't over," he said. "You're absolutely right," I replied. "It's just getting started." After they left, I sat in my recliner with a whiskey and Cassie's secret phone. I'd managed to guess her passcode, our anniversary date, because apparently she had a sense of humor about betrayal, and spent the evening reading through months of messages. The picture they painted was worse than I'd imagined. This wasn't just physical infidelity. They'd been planning together, scheming together, laughing about how easy it was to fool poor, dumb Nate. There were photos of them in my garage, my bed, even my kitchen. They'd turned my entire life into their playground. But the most interesting messages were the recent ones, the ones about their future plans. Cassie wasn't just cheating on me. She was planning to destroy me on her way out. According to their texts, I was going to be framed for stealing client information from Cassie's real estate office. Bryce had it all worked out. How they'd plant evidence, how they'd make it look like I'd been using my access to Cassie's work computer to steal financial information about her clients. It was a good plan. It might have even worked if I hadn't found their communications first. I finished my whiskey and started making plans of my own. If Cassie and Bryce wanted to play games, I'd teach them some new rules. Rules where the house always wins, and I was the house. Saturday morning, I drove to Danny's auto shop with a proposal that would have sounded crazy a week ago. Now it sounded like justice. "You want me to help you what?" Danny looked up from the engine he was rebuilding, grease smeared across his forearms. "Sabotage his car. Nothing permanent, nothing dangerous, just expensive and embarrassing." Danny set down his wrench and wiped his hands on a shop rag. "Nate, I've known you for 20 years. You've never been the revenge type?" "I've never been cheated on by someone planning to frame me for theft either. Times change." I showed him the messages on Cassie's phone, watched his expression shift from skepticism to anger to something that looked like professional interest. "Sugar in the gas tank won't actually ruin the engine," he said thoughtfully. "That's just movie nonsense. But there are other things. Messier things." "I'm listening." 2 hours later, we had a plan that was beautiful in its simplicity. Saturday night, while Bryce and Cassie were at their usual dinner spot, Danny and I would pay a visit to his precious Porsche. The plan went off without a hitch. Bryce parked in the same spot he always did, right in front of Antonelli's, where everyone could admire his expensive toy. He and Cassie were settled in their usual booth, visible through the restaurant's large windows, completely absorbed in each other. Danny worked with the quiet efficiency of a professional while I kept watch. A few strategic cuts to ensure his air conditioning would pump out the most horrific smell imaginable. A creative rearrangement of some interior components that would make the car drivable but deeply unpleasant. And finally, a message spray-painted across the hood in bright red letters, "Home Wrecker." We were gone in 15 minutes, leaving no trace except our handiwork. The call came at 11:30 that night. "You son of a—" Bryce's voice was strangled with rage. "Evening, Bryce. How was dinner?" "You know damn well how dinner was." "What you did to my car?" "I didn't do anything to your car. I've been home all evening watching television. Danny can vouch for me. We were discussing a construction project over beer." "This is vandalism. I'm calling the police." "You should absolutely do that. I'm sure they'll be very interested in your story." "Officer, Someone vandalized my car while I was having dinner with another man's girlfriend at the same restaurant we've been meeting at for months. Yeah, that'll get you a lot of sympathy. The silence stretched long enough for me to know I'd hit my target. You took my wife, I took your ride, I continued, echoing the note Danny had left under his windshield wiper. Seems like a fair trade to me. Cassie was never your wife. You're right. Thanks for making sure it stayed that way. He hung up on me, but I knew this was just the beginning. Bryce LaRoche had built his life on being untouchable, on taking what he wanted without consequences. I was about to teach him that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Sunday morning brought news that made my coffee taste like victory. Sergeant Mike O'Brien, a guy I'd known since high school who now worked for the local police, called with an update. Got a vandalism report from your friend Bryce, he said, and I could hear the amusement in his voice. Seems someone decorated his Porsche with some colorful language about his romantic habits. That's terrible. Any leads? Well, he seems to think you're involved. But seeing as how you were home all evening with witnesses, and seeing as how his complaint basically amounts to, someone called me out for sleeping with another man's girlfriend, I don't think this case is going to be a high priority. The system works. Sometimes it does. Word of advice, though, be careful. Guys like LaRoche don't like being embarrassed. They tend to escalate. Mike was right. Bryce escalated Tuesday morning by showing up at my office. The city building inspection department wasn't much to look at. A few desks in a converted warehouse, filing cabinets full of permits and violation notices, the smell of coffee and concrete dust. I was reviewing plans for a new strip mall when Bryce walked in like he owned the place. We need to talk, he announced, loud enough for everyone in the office to hear. I looked up from my blueprints. I'm sorry, do you have an appointment? Because I'm pretty busy ensuring buildings don't collapse and hurt people. It's important work. Cut the act. You know why I'm here. Actually, I don't. Are you here about a building permit? A construction violation? Because those are the only reasons people usually visit the building inspection office. My supervisor, Janet Crawford, looked up from her desk with interest. Bryce was starting to realize he'd walked into my territory, where I had authority, and he was just another citizen with a complaint. Your little prank cost me $3,000 in repairs, he said, lowering his voice slightly. I'm sorry to hear about your car troubles. Have you considered that maybe someone's trying to send you a message about your behavior? My behavior? Well, stealing other people's girlfriends isn't exactly a victimless crime. Maybe someone thought you needed a reminder that actions have consequences. Janet was openly listening now, along with two other inspectors. Bryce's face was turning red as he realized he was providing entertainment for my coworkers. This isn't over, he said, the same threat he'd made at my house. You keep saying that. But from where I'm sitting, it looks pretty over. You got the girl, I got my freedom, and someone gave you a very expensive lesson in karma. Seems like everyone got what they deserved. After he left, Janet walked over to my desk with a cup of coffee and a curious expression. Friend of yours? She asked. More like a learning experience, I replied. Some people think they can take whatever they want without consequences. It's always interesting when they discover they're wrong. That evening, Cassie called. Her voice was different, less confident, more careful. Nate, we need to talk about this situation with Bryce. What situation would that be? You know what situation. The car, the harassment, all of it. This has to stop. I haven't harassed anyone, Cass. I've been going to work, coming home, living my life. If Bryce is feeling harassed, maybe he should examine his own behavior. He didn't deserve what happened to his car. Didn't he? He spent months sneaking around with another man's girlfriend, using that man's house for his affairs, planning to frame that man for theft. What exactly did he deserve? The pause told me she hadn't expected me to know about their frame-up plan. I don't know what you think you know. I know everything, Cassie. Every text, every photo, every plan you two made, including the one where you were going to destroy my reputation and possibly land me in prison, so forgive me if I don't have much sympathy for Bryce's car troubles. We never actually went through with that. Only because I found out first. But thanks for confirming it was real. Another pause, longer this time. What do you want? She asked finally. I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to realize that the people you hurt might hurt you back, and I want you to know that this is just the beginning. The beginning of what? Your education in what it feels like to lose everything that matters to you. I hung up and poured myself a whiskey. Outside my window, the neighborhood was settling into evening routines. Families having dinner, kids playing in yards, normal people living normal lives. I wasn't normal anymore. Cassie and Bryce had changed that when they decided to make me their victim. Now they were going to learn what it felt like to be on the other side of that equation. The next phase of my education began Wednesday morning when I discovered that Bryce had filed a restraining order against me. The papers were waiting on my desk when I got to work, delivered by a process server who looked apologetic about the whole thing. Harassment, stalking, and vandalism, I read aloud to Janet, who was hovering nearby with undisguised curiosity. Apparently, I'm a dangerous individual. Are you? She asked with a grin. Only to people who deserve it. The restraining order was a nuisance, but it was also a mistake on Bryce's part. Legal documents leave paper trails, and paper trails can be very revealing when you know how to read them. More importantly, they can be turned around and used as weapons by people who understand the system. I spent my lunch break at the courthouse filing my own restraining order against Bryce. My documentation was more thorough than his. Copies of the threatening messages from Cassie's phone, photos of him on my property making demands, witness statements from neighbors who'd seen him pounding on my door. I also included a detailed complaint about harassment and intimidation, backed up by security camera footage from my office building that showed him making threats in my workplace. By Thursday afternoon, we both had restraining orders against each other, which would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. But the real entertainment started Friday morning when Marjorie Fields called me at work. Mr. Harlan, this is Marjorie Fields from Fields Real Estate. I believe you know one of my former employees, Cassie Porter. Former employee. That was interesting. I know Cassie, yes. What can I do for you? I was hoping you might be able to help me understand some irregularities we've discovered in our client database. It appears that confidential client information has been accessed and possibly shared with outside parties. Cassie's computer access logs show some unusual activity. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment. What kind of unusual activity? Searches for specific client financial information, particularly clients who've made large real estate purchases recently. The kind of information that would be very valuable to, say, a luxury car dealer looking to target wealthy potential customers. That does sound irregular. The thing is, Cassie claims she never accessed this information. She suggests that someone else might have used her computer, someone who had access to her passwords and login credentials. Like a boyfriend? That was her suggestion, yes. She mentioned that you had access to her work computer at home, that you'd helped her with technical issues in the past. There it was. The frame-up plan, activated now that their relationship was public and Cassie was facing consequences. They were trying to pin their scheme on me, just like I'd read in their messages. Ms. Fields, I think you should know that Cassie and I broke up recently. She's been involved with Bryce LaRoche, who owns LaRoche Luxury Cars. I have documentation showing that she's been sharing client information with him for months as part of their relationship. Documentation? Text messages, photos, detailed discussions of their business arrangement. I'd be happy to share copies with you and with the police if necessary. The silence on the other end was profound. Would you be willing to come in and discuss this matter in person? She asked finally. Absolutely. How about this afternoon? The meeting at Fields Real Estate was everything I'd hoped for and more. Marjorie Fields was a no-nonsense businesswoman who'd built her company on reputation and trust. Learning that one of her employees had been stealing client information and trying to frame an innocent person for the theft made her angrier than I'd ever seen another human being. This is a disaster, she said after reviewing the evidence I'd brought. Our clients trust us with their most sensitive financial information. If word gets out that we've had a data breach... It doesn't have to get out, I said carefully. As long as the right people face the right consequences. She understood immediately. What do you want? I want Cassie fired, obviously. I want a clear statement that I had nothing to do with any data theft, and I want Bryce LaRoche to understand that his business relationship with your company is permanently terminated. Done. What else? I want you to report this to the State Real Estate Board. Cassie shouldn't be able to just move to another agency and do this again. Also done. Anything else? I pretended to think about it. Actually, yes. I want you to send a letter to all your clients informing them that their information may have been compromised and suggesting they be cautious about unsolicited contact from luxury car dealers. Marjorie smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. That's a very thorough suggestion, Mr. Harlan. I think we can accommodate that request. By Monday morning, Cassie's career in real estate was over. The state board moved quickly when presented with clear evidence of ethical violations, and word spread through the local real estate community like wildfire. No agency in 3 counties would touch her. Bryce's business took a hit, too. Marjorie's letter to her clients was professionally worded, but devastatingly clear about the risks of dealing with LaRoche luxury cars. Several pending sales fell through, and his reputation in the community took a beating he wouldn't recover from quickly. But they weren't done fighting back. Tuesday evening, I came home to find my front door jimmied open and my house ransacked. Nothing was stolen, but everything was disrupted. Furniture overturned, papers scattered, a clear message that they could reach me whenever they wanted. I called the police, filed a report, and installed a security system that same week. If they wanted to escalate, I'd be ready. The real escalation came Friday night. I was having dinner at Murphy's bar when Cassie walked in, alone and looking like she hadn't slept in days. She slid into the booth across from me without invitation. "You've destroyed my life," she said without preamble. "I've revealed your life," I corrected. "There's a difference. I can't get a job anywhere. No real estate agency will hire me. My reputation is ruined." "Actions have consequences, Cass. You taught me that." "This has gone far enough. What do you want? Money? An apology? What will it take to make this stop?" I set down my beer and looked at her. Really looked. The woman who'd shared my bed for 3 years, who'd let me believe we had a future while she planned my destruction. She looked smaller now, diminished by the consequences of her choices. "I want you to understand what it feels like," I said finally. "I want you to know what it's like to have someone you trust betray you completely. I want you to experience the humiliation of having your private business become public entertainment. And I want you to realize that the person you thought you could destroy was stronger than you imagined. You're not the same person I knew. No, I'm not. You changed me when you decided to make me your victim. This is who I am now." She left without another word, but I knew this wasn't over. Desperate people do desperate things, and Cassie was running out of options. I finished my beer and went home to my empty house, my security system, and my plans for the final act of this drama. Because if Cassie and Bryce thought they'd seen the worst I could do, they were about to learn how wrong they were. The storm hit on a Thursday night in November, 3 months after Cassie had rejected my proposal and changed both our lives forever. I was sitting in my living room, reading construction blueprints and listening to the wind howl around my house when the security system chimed. Motion detected. Front yard. The camera feed showed 2 figures approaching through the rain, Cassie and Bryce, both soaked and moving with the desperate urgency of people who'd run out of better options. Bryce carried something in his right hand that looked like a crowbar. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Time to settle this face-to-face. Come outside or we come in." I smiled in the darkness of my living room. 3 months of careful planning had led to this moment, and they were walking right into the trap I'd prepared. Instead of responding to the text, I activated the secondary security system, the one they didn't know about. Hidden cameras began recording, streaming live to a social media account I'd set up specifically for this purpose. The account already had 200 followers, mostly local people who'd been following the drama through neighborhood gossip and social media rumors. The title of the live stream was simple: Home Invasion, Watch Cheaters Attack Victim. Within minutes of going live, viewers started joining. The chat filled with comments as people recognized the participants and began sharing the stream. Bryce tried the front door first, finding it locked. Then he moved to the windows, testing each one while Cassie kept watch. The cameras captured everything in high definition: their faces, their actions, their obvious intent to break into my home. My phone rang. Bryce's number. "Last chance," he said when I answered. "Come out and talk like a man, or we come in and drag you out." "Actually, Bryce, I have a better idea. Why don't you look up at the camera mounted above my front door and wave to your audience?" "What audience?" "The 230 people currently watching you attempt to break into my house on live television. Well, live internet stream, technically, but the effect is the same." I could see him through the camera feed, looking up at the device he'd never noticed before. His face went pale as he realized what was happening. "That's right," I continued. "Every threat you've made, every attempt to break in, every crime you're committing right now is being broadcast live to anyone who wants to watch. The chat is particularly entertaining. Lots of people seem to recognize you both." Cassie appeared in the camera frame, grabbing Bryce's arm and saying something I couldn't hear through the rain, but the viewers could read her lips, and the chat exploded with commentary. "She's telling him to break the door down anyway," I read aloud from the comments. "That's interesting advice, Cass. Breaking and entering with an audience. Very bold." The stream had over 400 viewers now, and the number was climbing. Someone had shared it to the local community Facebook page, and people were calling their friends to watch the show. Bryce made his decision. He raised the crowbar and smashed it against my front door, splintering the wood around the lock. The door held. I'd reinforced it specifically for this possibility, but the intent was clear. That's when I activated the house defenses I'd spent 3 months installing. The motion sensors triggered first, flooding the front yard with brilliant white light that made both intruders shield their eyes. Then came the sound. air horns mounted under the eaves, programmed to blast at 30-second intervals. The combination of light and noise was disorienting, but it was just the beginning. Bryce managed to get the front door open on his third attempt with the crowbar, but stepping inside triggered the next layer of defenses. A bucket of ice-cold water, rigged to a tripwire, dumped its contents on his head the moment he crossed the threshold. He stumbled backward, cursing, directly into the path of a paint balloon launcher I'd borrowed from Danny's nephew. The paint was washable, but it was also bright purple and very, very visible. Bryce emerged from my entryway looking like he'd been attacked by a giant grape, soaked and furious and completely humiliated. The livestream audience was loving every second of it. Comments poured in faster than I could read them, and the viewer count had passed 800. "Having fun yet?" I called out from my position in the living room, safely behind the reinforced door I'd installed between the entryway and the rest of the house. Cassie tried to calm Bryce down, but he was beyond reason now. He charged the inner door with his shoulder, bouncing off the steel reinforcement like a tennis ball. The impact triggered another bucket of water, this one mixed with biodegradable glitter that stuck to his paint-covered clothes. "You're insane," Cassie screamed at the camera. "This is assault." "Actually," I replied through the intercom system I'd installed, "this is home defense. You broke into my house, remember? The 850 people watching this happen remember. They saw you threaten me, break down my door, and enter my home with a weapon. What they're seeing now is a homeowner protecting himself from intruders." The next trap was my personal favorite. Bryce, still trying to break through the inner door, stepped on a pressure plate that activated a mechanism I'd designed myself. A boxing glove on a spring-loaded arm shot out of the wall, catching him square in the face and sending him sprawling backward into Cassie. They both went down in a tangle of purple paint, glitter, and wounded pride. The live stream chat was moving so fast it was just a blur of laughter emojis and fire symbols. "This is what happens," I announced to my audience, "when people think they can destroy someone's life without consequences. Ladies and gentlemen, I present Bryce LaRoche and Cassie Porter, home invaders, cheaters, and the stars of tonight's entertainment." That's when Sergeant Mike O'Brien arrived, having been alerted by multiple viewers who'd called the police. He walked into my house, looked at the two intruders covered in paint and glitter, and shook his head. "Well," he said to the camera, apparently realizing he was being broadcast live, "this is definitely the most interesting domestic disturbance call I've had this year." "Evening, Mike," I said, finally emerging from behind my reinforced door. "Thanks for coming. As you can see, we had some uninvited guests tonight." Mike looked at Bryce, who was trying to wipe purple paint out of his eyes, then at Cassie, who was covered in glitter and looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "Let me guess," Mike said. "They broke in, you defended your home, and somehow they ended up looking like they lost a fight with a craft store? That's a very accurate summary. And you broadcast the whole thing live? I thought the community should see what kind of people they're dealing with. Transparency in action." Mike walked over to examine my front door, noting the crowbar damage and the clear signs of forced entry. Then he looked at the cameras, the defensive mechanisms, and the elaborate setup I'd created. "This was all planned," he said. "It wasn't a question. I prepared for the possibility that they might escalate their harassment to the point of breaking into my home, yes. I wanted to be ready to defend myself and document any crimes they committed. And the paint and glitter? Non-lethal deterrence. Much more civilized than a shotgun, don't you think?" Mike grinned despite himself. "Much more entertaining, too. This stream has over 1,000 viewers now." He was right. The viewer count had exploded as word spread through social media. Local news stations were probably already sending reporters. By morning, this would be the most watched video in the county's history. "Bryce LaRoche and Cassie Porter," Mike announced to the camera as he pulled out his handcuffs. "You're under arrest for breaking and entering, attempted burglary, and criminal trespass. You have the right to remain silent, though I suspect that ship has sailed since you committed your crimes in front of 1,000 witnesses." The arrest was almost anticlimactic after everything that had led up to it. Bryce and Cassie were loaded into separate police cars, still covered in paint and glitter, still being broadcast live to an audience that had grown to over 1,500 people. As the police cars pulled away, I addressed my viewers one final time. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for witnessing tonight's demonstration of what happens when people think they can destroy someone's life without consequences. Cassie Porter and Bryce LaRoche thought they could cheat, lie, steal, and intimidate their way to happiness. Instead, they've earned themselves criminal records and the distinction of being the most publicly humiliated couple in county history." I paused, looking directly into the camera. "The lesson here is simple. Actions have consequences. Choose your actions wisely, because you never know who might be watching, recording, and planning to give you exactly what you deserve." I ended the live stream and stood on my front porch in the rain, looking out at the empty street. My house was a mess, my front door was broken, and I'd have to clean paint and glitter out of my entryway tomorrow. But Cassie and Bryce were finished. Their reputations were destroyed beyond repair, their crimes were documented and witnessed by thousands of people, and their relationship had been exposed for exactly what it was, a partnership built on betrayal and greed. I walked back into my house and poured myself a whiskey. Outside, the storm was finally beginning to clear, and I could see stars appearing between the clouds. Tomorrow, I'd fix my door and clean up the mess. Tomorrow, I'd deal with the reporters and the lawyers and all the aftermath of tonight's events. Tomorrow, I'd start figuring out what came next. But tonight, I'd won. Tonight, justice had been served with a side of purple paint and biodegradable glitter. Tonight, the hammer had finally fallen, and it had landed exactly where it belonged. I raised my glass to the empty room and smiled. Guess I'll need a new front door, I said to no one in particular, and maybe a lock for my heart next time. But there wouldn't be a next time. Not like this. Because I wasn't the same man who'd proposed to Cassie Porter 3 months ago. I was someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous to people who thought they could take advantage of others without consequences. The storm was over, and I was still standing. That was victory enough.